Random House Audio presents The Great Transformation, the Beginning of Our Religious Traditions. Written and read by Karen Armstrong.
Introduction. Perhaps every generation believes that it has reached a turning point of history, but our problems seem particularly intractable and our future increasingly uncertain. Many of our difficulties mask a deeper spiritual crisis. During the 20th century, we saw the eruption of violence on an unprecedented scale. Sadly, our ability to harm and mutilate one another has kept pace with our extraordinary economic and scientific progress. We seem to lack the wisdom to hold our aggression in check and keep it within safe and appropriate bounds. The explosion of the first atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki laid bare the nihilistic self-destruction at the heart of the brilliant achievements of our modern culture. We risk environmental catastrophe because we no longer see the earth as holy, but regard it simply as a resource. Unless there's some kind of spiritual revolution that can keep abreast of our technological genius, it is unlikely that we will save our planet. A purely rational education will not suffice. We have found to our cost that a great university can exist in the same vicinity as a concentration camp. Auschwitz, Rwanda, Bosnia, and the destruction of the World Trade Center were all dark epiphanies that revealed what can happen when the sense of the sacred inviolability of every single human being has been lost. Religion, which is supposed to help us to cultivate this attitude, often seems to reflect the violence and desperation of our times. Almost every day we see examples of religiously motivated terrorism, hatred, and intolerance. An increasing number of people find traditional religious doctrines and practices irrelevant and incredible, and turn to art, music, literature, dance, sport, or drugs to give them the transcendent experience that humans seem to require. In our current predicament, I believe that we can find inspiration in the period that the German philosopher Karl Jaspers called the Axial Age, because it was pivotal to the spiritual development of humanity. From about 900 to 200 BCE, in 4 distinct regions, the great world traditions that have continued to nourish humanity came into being. Confucianism and Daoism in China, Hinduism and Buddhism in India, monotheism in Israel, and philosophical rationalism in Greece. Incidentally, unless otherwise specified, all dates in this book are BCE, before the Common Era. This was the period of the Buddha, Socrates, Confucius, and Jeremiah, the mystics of the Upanishads, Mencius and Euripides. During this period of intense creativity, spiritual and philosophical geniuses pioneered an entirely new kind of human experience. Many of them worked anonymously, but others became luminaries who can still fill us with emotion because they show us what a human being should be. The Axial Age was one of the most seminal periods of intellectual, psychological, philosophical, and religious change in recorded history. There would be nothing comparable until the Great Western Transformation, which created our own scientific and technological modernity. But how can the sages of the Axial Age, who lived in such different circumstances, speak to our current condition? Why should we look to Confucius or the Buddha for help? Surely a study of this distant period can only be an exercise in spiritual archaeology, when what we need is to create a more innovative faith that reflects the realities of our own world. Yet, in fact, we have never surpassed the insights of the Axial Age. In times of spiritual and social crisis, men and women have constantly turned back to this period for guidance. They may have interpreted the axial discoveries differently, but they have never succeeded in going beyond them. The prophets, mystics, philosophers, and poets of the Axial Age were so advanced, and their vision was so radical, that later generations tended to dilute it. In the process, they often produced exactly the kind of religiosity that the axial reformers wanted to get rid of. That, I believe, is what has happened in the modern world. The axial sages have an important message for our time, but their insights will be surprising, even shocking, to many who consider themselves religious today. It is frequently assumed, for example, that faith is a matter of believing certain creedal propositions. Indeed, it is common to call religious people believers, as though assenting to the articles of faith were their chief activity. But most of the axial philosophers had no interest whatever in doctrine or metaphysics. A person's theological beliefs were a matter of total indifference to somebody like the Buddha. Some sages steadfastly refused even to discuss theology, claiming that it was distracting and damaging. Others argued that it was immature, unrealistic, and perverse to look for the kind of absolute certainty that many people expect religion to provide. What mattered was not what you believed, but how you behaved. Religion was about doing things that changed you at a profound level. Before the Axial Age, ritual and animal sacrifice had been central to the religious quest. You experienced the divine in sacred dramas that, like a great theatrical experience today, introduced you to another level of existence. The axial sages changed this. They still valued ritual, but gave it a new ethical significance and put morality at the heart of the spiritual life. The only way you could encounter what they called God, Nirvana, Brahman, or the Way, was to live a compassionate life. This meant that you had to be ready to change. The axial sages were not interested in providing their disciples with a little edifying uplift, after which they could return with renewed vigor to their ordinary, self-centered lives. Their objective was to create an entirely different kind of human being. All the sages preached a spirituality of empathy and compassion. They insisted that people must abandon their egotism and greed, their violence and unkindness. Not only was it wrong to kill another human being, you must not even speak a hostile word or make an irritable gesture. Further, nearly all the axial sages realized that you could not confine your benevolence to your own people. Your concern must somehow extend to the entire world. We need to rediscover this axial ethos. In our global village, we can no longer afford a parochial or exclusive vision. We must learn to live and behave as though people in countries remote from our own are as important as ourselves. The sages of the Axial Age did not create their compassionate ethic in idyllic circumstances. Each tradition developed in societies like our own that were torn apart by violence and warfare as never before. Indeed, the first catalyst of religious change was usually a principled rejection of the aggression that the sages witnessed all around them. When they started to look for the causes of violence in the psyche, the axial philosophers penetrated their interior world and began to explore a hitherto undiscovered realm of human experience. We cannot appreciate the achievements of the Axial Age unless we are familiar with what went before, so we need to understand the pre-axial religion of early antiquity. This had certain common features that would all be important to the Axial Age. Most societies, for example, had an early belief in a high god, who was often called the sky god, since he was associated with the heavens. Because he was rather inaccessible, he tended to fade from the religious consciousness. Some said that he disappeared, others that he'd been violently displaced by a younger.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?